Hi everyone. It's a very hot Georgia night, and I decided to do this out by a fire just because you can hear all the sounds. Anyway, tonight, right now, I'm going to read the How I Can Meet My Man number 6, which is called No Gas. And like always, it's dedicated to Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ and my family for they mean all to me. And this is also dedicated to every person who has ever come to the rescue when someone has been out of gas. So here we go. It was about 9:30 p.m. and I felt incredibly stupid as my truck made a weird coughing sound, which scared me so much that I jumped and spilled my fruit punch on my pretty light pink bridesmaid's dress. The truck then sputtered a couple more times. Looking down, I realized my gas was gone. I had not been paying attention at all to the needle because I was beyond lost. My maps were no good in this part of the city, and the directions provided by a seemingly nice man on the corner hours ago were completely wrong, or he left out a critical step. I steered my truck into a space on the side of the dark road, pulled out the key, and realized that I was in a predicament beyond predicament. My eyes scanned the buildings around me, and it looked like I could easily be in the worst part of town. All I saw were dark buildings and very dimly lit bars, but what really scared me was the absence of people. Not a single person could be seen. One of the street lamps flickered on and off about 2 cars ahead of me, creating an even creepier environment for an overactive imagination. I picked up my dead cell phone, which had died earlier that evening, and tried to turn it on, hoping, but it just turned on enough to say, "Low battery," then turned off again. Feeling a little panicky, I bowed my head and prayed for help. After my prayer, I felt like it would be okay. So, with a little bravery in my heart and pepper spray in my dress pocket, I unlocked my door and got out. My plan was to go into a bar and number 1, find out where I was, and number 2, use a phone if possible. Not my ideal choice of action, but it was the only one I had. I closed and locked my door as quietly as possible, but it felt like I was giving away my position to all the unseen eyes in the surrounding buildings. Even the air seemed dark and heavy. Turning around to look at the buildings, I picked the bar that seemed the least creepy and headed towards it. As I rounded the back of my truck, I heard footsteps and turned to find a figure walking briskly down the very dark sidewalk, coming from the direction I had been heading. I paused. For some reason, he seemed very out of place in the dreary night, but he was dressed dark and easily blended in with the environment around him. However, there was such an indescribable difference between that man as he neared and the rest of the area. I waited for him to get closer before talking. I said, and he jumped. His face fell as he took in my appearance. His gaze went up from my sandals to a light pink mid-calf short-sleeved spring dress to my brown hair styled into braided pigtails that came down past my shoulders. "What in the world are you doing here?" he asked, shocked, and looked around to see if he could see anyone. "I'm lost, and I have no more gas," I said quickly and quietly, now feeling like I stuck out like a live flower in a dead bouquet. "You are definitely lost," he exclaimed in a strained whisper and continued, "A woman like you would never come here on purpose." He got closer and began to whisper urgently, "Get back in your truck and hide yourself as best you can. I have a friend nearby who has some gas we can use." He reached out and gave me a push towards my truck and then ran across the street and down a nearby alley. "We?" I wondered as I went quickly and quietly to my truck, got in, locked the door, pulled my long black coat from behind the seat, and lay down on the seat, covering myself. Later, after what seemed like forever, I heard someone trying to open my gas flap. When he could not, he gave a little tap on the side of the truck, and it popped open for him. Upon hearing the flap close, I rose up to look. The man put the can in the back of the truck and came over to the passenger's side and motioned for me to unlock the door. I felt a bit crazy, but I did. He got in and relocked the door. I live behind the nearest gas station. Turn around and go back that way, he said, pointing behind us, and pulled out his phone and dialed a number. I put on my seatbelt and he did the same. I turned on the truck and turned around just as he instructed. Hey, sweetheart, he said. I'll be home late. I'm helping somebody, but we're on our way. Love you, bye. Wife? I asked as I turned in the direction he pointed. He chuckled and shook his head no. No, it was for my dog. I grinned and he continued. She's very protective and worries when I'm not home at 10 o'clock sharp. She begins to bark insanely and that drives the neighbors crazy, but she won't worry if I call her and tell her I am on my way. He chuckled. Go left, that way, he said, pointing again. Thank you for helping me, I said. You're welcome. I don't usually walk home from work that way, but I guess God wanted me to help you out. We smiled at each other and I said, Yep, you were a direct answer to my prayer. I took so many turns, it was crazy. I never would have found my way out of the area if it had not been for him. I felt like I was weaving in and out of the threads of a thick city tapestry. It should be just up ahead, he told me, and his phone buzzed. Hey, there's a fire around here somewhere. I can smell smoke, I said, sniffing the air. Not a moment later, I could see smoke lit up by the street lights and drifting towards us. He looked up at the smoke and then back to the message that had just arrived on his phone, and he sucked in his breath. My house is on fire, he said quietly. I maneuvered the truck around the buildings as quickly as I could, following his directions. Park there, he said, pointing to a spot on the opposite side of the road. We got out and looked at the scene before us. People were watching from their porches as the fire grew on the front of his house. We could hear the fire truck in the distance. He looked horror-stricken, and I knew he was thinking about his dog. Wait, I said, listening. I can hear a dog. He looked at me and listened with a very focused face. She's in the bathroom, he said, and began to run to the house. I followed him to the back of the house to a small window. He tried to open it as he stood on the water spigot, but it wouldn't open. Spotting a metal baseball bat in the neighbor's grass, I ran and grabbed it. Here, I said, handing it to him. He took it and swung it at the window, breaking it. The flames were approaching us from the left and right sides of the house, as well as the roof. He didn't seem to notice as he continued to use the bat to break out the window. Murger, he said, pulling himself up to look in the window. We heard a very loud bark. I moved over beside the house and put my back to it. Here, step on my shoulder to get inside, I said. He did not hesitate, and he did so with his dirty shoe. Gritting my teeth, I glanced up at the fire I could see creeping around the edge of the roof. This is so dangerous, I thought to myself as I moved out from under the window. He crawled inside, laid a towel on the glass-covered windowsill, lifted his large dog up, and pushed her through the window. She landed on the ground a bit rough, but seemed okay when I squatted down to check her legs. He began to come out next, face first. I stood and moved to help him, so he did not land on his face. His feet were still on the windowsill when the firefighters came running around the house to help. Flames came down near his head, which caused him to flinch and dodge it. As he moved, the glass under the towel shifted, causing him to slip and fall right on top of me, knocking my air out. Boom! An explosion ripped through the house just as he was moving to get off me. He covered me with his body, and pieces of the house landed on us, catching my dress on fire. The debris was quickly pulled off by the firefighters, and they smothered the fire on my dress. Pulling us to our feet, they got us away from the house. Then we watched it continue to burn. Murger came up beside me and put her head under my hand. I automatically began to rub her head gently. A firefighter began to walk towards us, and Murger began to growl at him as if it were his fault the house was burning. Chuckling, I squatted down to her while her owner went to talk to the fireman and said, You know, Murger, he is a fireman, and he came to help to put out the fire. He did not start it. She looked at the fireman for a moment, then went to him. She put her head towards him for a pet, and he rubbed her ears. Murger's owner came back to stand beside me, and I studied his expression. He did not seem too upset about his house catching on fire. He turned to me and smiled softly, reaching out to brush off some of the dirt he had left on my pink dress. "Sorry about your dress, but thanks for the help," he said. And turned to look at the back of the house. I turned to look as well. "I'm Vince," he said, and gently put his arm around my shoulder while Murger put her head under my hand. I smiled at him. "I'm Renee." He nodded at me, and a tear fell down his face, which surprised me because the rest of his face seemed pleased. The firemen were having trouble with the fire hydrant, so we just ended up watching his house burn to the ground. "Which direction are you headed?" he asked me very quietly once it collapsed and the flames started to die down. I looked at him and smiled as I replied, "I'm not sure. I'm still lost." At this, he grinned and said, "I'm not. Not anymore." He looked at me in the face for a good long moment. I could not help but grin. He turned and directed me towards my truck. "What are you going to do?" I asked with a gesture at what was left of his house. "Go with you," he said, ignoring the gesture. "That's not what I meant," I said with a chuckle. "The house was the only thing keeping me here," he admitted. "With it gone, I can go too, and I want to go with you." He looked back to his house. "I think I will just donate this mess to the city. Maybe they'll make a park or a parking lot out of it," he said and grinned. "Where were you headed anyway?" "Municipal Park for a wedding reception," I said and looked down at my burnt dress. "It doesn't look too bad. If you know where it is, maybe I still have time to say congratulations." They are kind of party-hardy friends, so maybe I still have time. He grinned and said, "Can I come?" "What about your house? Aren't they going to investigate and need to ask you some questions?" "Yeah, I suppose they will, huh?" he said, a little disappointed. He reached his free hand in front of me and pointed. My gaze followed his finger across the street to a park. My eyes widened as I saw my friends and all their guests lined up on the sidewalk watching the events. The whole group seemed frozen with their mouths hanging open. "No way, really?" I said and began to chuckle. He grinned. "I don't think you getting lost was a coincidence," he stated with a glance back to his house. "Me neither. Murger would have died." I gave the dog's head a good scratch. "Do you think they would mind a couple more guests? Mainly a homeless man and his dog?" Laughing, my arm went around him and I grinned. "All right, come on. And check it out. We can just walk. We don't need any gas." He laughed. "You had better get some gas first because the gas station closes at 10:30. That's in 10 minutes. "Okay, I will go fuel up while you go talk with them." It was my turn to point. He turned to look at the officers walking towards us. "Good plan," he said. I was surprised when Murger followed me over to the truck and jumped in the back. I drove over to the gas station, fueled up, went across the street to park, and sat in the truck for a minute to clean the soot off my face. Vince walked over and opened the door for me. "Ready?" I said with a grin as I got out and wiped some soot off of his face. "Yes, you?" he asked and looked over to the park. I followed his gaze and saw a swarm of people heading my way with the bride and groom out front. Vince and I moved out and around the truck, and we were surrounded. "We are so sorry," the bride and groom exclaimed with immense gusto. "Why?" Vince and I asked at the same time. "One of our fireworks," the bride stammered out, horrified, and one of the groom's fingers pointed back to the burnt house. Vince got all serious and said, "At least it was my house and not the gas station." Then he grinned and continued as we watched everyone process that information. "It's all right. It's just a house." He shrugged and smiled very kindly at them all. "I'm sorry I'm late," I said, trying to diffuse the horrified looks on people's faces. "I got lost." I started, then paused because the bride and groom now looked like they were going to start crying. Vince stepped forward and put an arm around both of them, pulling them close. I promise that it is okay, he said kindly. Then, with more energy, he added, You just got married. That's wonderful. Congratulations. Do you have anything good to eat? That broke the tension and sorrow. Someone let out a laugh and others followed. The bride grabbed me and the groom kept a hold of Vince, and we were hauled to the park. Oh, Peyton, I said to the bride as we got back over to the table. It turned out beautiful. Isn't it? She said. I'm down to just a face. Sorry, tangent. Okay, isn't it? She said, and her eyes glowed with happiness. Her gaze landed on my burnt dress, and the happiness began to leave. Ah, I said with a grin. It's just a dress, I said, then leaned in and whispered to her with a sneaky grin. Actually, there was a stain on that part, and I was a little embarrassed. She burst out laughing. The parents of the bride and groom came over. We are going over to talk with the officers for a minute, her father said with a look of, Don't worry, we will take care of everything. His daughter kissed his cheek, then grabbed one of my hands and one of Vince's and hauled us over to the food tables. Murger followed right beside us. As we were eating, Peyton's brother came over and sat beside Vince with his hand out. I'm Charlie, he said, and the two men shook hands. Vince. Charlie said. I could use a roommate, Charlie offered, then gave a little humble shrug. It's not much, and above a gym, so it smells weird, but you're more than welcome. He then got up with a jump to match the beat of a new song, and off he went to dance. We looked at each other and smiled. Nope. Not a coincidence, we said together and looked up, with thanks to God. Vince boldly took my hand and led me to the dance floor. That's the end of the story. So my thoughts, quickly say it because I'm running out of fire. This looks really funny. Okay, my thoughts. This story came to me on September 20th, 2012, as I sat down to study my scriptures. Not wanting to lose it, I got back up from my chair, went to my computer desk, turned on my computer, and as soon as it was up and running, I began to type. The parts I like the most are first when I saw him in the darkness. It was like looking at evil all around, but being given instant knowledge to know that one piece, which looks like it belongs, but does not, and is in fact good beyond belief. It's the opposite of how I, at least, have usually seen evil. Usually the evil thing is the one hidden among the good. Something to ponder over for sure. It's something to think about. He also, I also like the fact that he also saw me out of place. Go figure. With just what I look like, he knew how lost I had become and was going to do everything to help me get out of that area of town. I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel that lost without really being physically lost. It's nice when someone who you do not know helps you to find your way again. It is even better when help comes from someone you love and who loves you. That kind of help enables you to find your way, but it also strengthens your relationships. In this story, Vince had to wait until I got myself completely lost in order for me to be found in the right place at the right time. A place where he was able to also find help and guide me. I greatly desire for my future husband to be able to see when I'm getting lost and help me find my way once more. I also wish to be the type of wife to do the same for him. In this story, Vince helped me find my way, and I helped him rescue his precious dog. So right from the get-go, we were serving, saving too, and helping each other. Being a helpmeet to one's spouse is the way it's supposed to work. I know there's definitely a learning curve here, but it's only as steep as the two of you make it. Oh, yeah. And I love the whole wedding party standing across the street watching. That would just be horrible. Can you imagine? I bet when that firework went off, it was watched in slow motion as it flew the wrong way and directly into the front window of Vince's house. breaking it. Then the suspense as everyone stood up and watched as the firework exploded inside the home and catching the drapes in the house on fire. Then they see me drive up with a strange man, get out, and run to the back of the house with him. A while later, the firemen run around the back. There is a big boom as the house explodes, and we all run back around the house, covered in ashes and burnt clothes, but still alive. And then me finally turning around to see them all watching. Only later did they hear about how we got inside and pushed out a dog, and then he squished me flat, and then how my dress caught on fire and how the firemen rescued us. Talk about feeling awful on your wedding day. Oh dear, what a scenario of how I could meet my future husband. So that's the end of No Gas. I hope you enjoyed it, and my fire is almost gone. So thanks for listening and watching, I guess, if you can still see my face. Bye, everybody.